back to another exotic car DIY. Today we're going to be looking at my 1999 Ferrari 355. We're going to be doing a little in-depth overview of underneath the hood, the bonnet, and underneath to kind of look at all the components and show you around a little bit. Hopefully to make these cars a little less intimidating. Remember, the whole reason I made this channel is to show you that you can work on these cars. The first thing you always hear when somebody says Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin is, aren't those expensive to work on? And I'm here to kind of debunk that or show you how to make repairs and maintenance a little bit more cost effective. It doesn't have to be a dealer relied experience. You can do almost everything yourselves. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. The other thing is we're going to be talking about maintenance. In fact, I'll go over that first. So I've owned this car now for 7 years. Everything that's broke on it, I have replaced. I haven't gone cheap anywhere on the car. And my total repair bill, with exception of the engine out, is $200. A battery and a blend door motor switch for the AC. That's it. It has been completely reliable. It's never left me stranded. It's never not started. It's been just a great car. So there are two reasons people talk about the maintenance on this. One, there's some people that have their ego all tied up in these cars and they want to make it seem like it's very exclusive. So they'll say, oh yeah, it cost a ton of money. I spent 25 grand doing an engine out last year. And then there's other people that are YouTubers or they just don't know about the car and they just want clickbait. And so they'll make crazy claims about how much it cost. So this is coming from an actual owner that's had it for a while. And I just wanted to show you that it's not that expensive. Real quick, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. That'll get this video to more people so they can see. Okay, so we're going to do this in 3 stages. I'm going to start underneath the bonnet to the front hood. Then we're going to go on the top of the motor and show you what we can see from the top up here. And then we're going to put it on a lift. Because I'm going to be kind of just pointing at stuff, I'm going to try to keep the camera steady, but do realize that if I explained every little thing, this probably video will be an hour, and I'm going to try to keep it underneath 10 minutes from here. So here we go. Let's just pop the hood and get started. Okay, so underneath the front bonnet on these is your luggage compartment. Just from what you can see topically, we just have the brake fill reservoir. There are 2 compartments you can access without opening anything. In here, you just have your windshield washer fluid and your brake. You can actually see the Bosch brake system. On the other side is your battery shut-off switch and the CD changer. All right, so to remove this, we're simply going to pull up on this rubber lining. There are 2 screws here, 2 screws underneath that panel, and then 5 screws that hold it in here. With the carpets removed, it exposes all the components up here in the front of the 355. I do want to apologize for the sound. It is dumping here in the Sunshine State. But anyway, let me go and give you a quick tour of what's going on. Starting over here, you have your brake master cylinder. This car is a Bosch equipped car, and they're actually relatively trouble free. You got your washer fluid reservoir filler, your brake reservoir. It's also your clutch reservoir if you have a 6-speed car. You can see underneath here is your clutch master cylinder. The red thing down there, that is one of the shock absorber adjustment motors. They're on all 4 shocks. We have our Bosch brake master cylinder. I put these little caps. This is the recharge ports for the cold and hot side of your air conditioning. We have a this is a selector valve for some of the coolant flow. Right here is your coolant motor. Since the engine is in the rear of these, it has to pump the heat coolant up here for the heater. Wiper motor. On the other side, you got your air conditioning ECU, another one of the shock absorber things. Here's your main battery cutoff for the for just storing your car. The AC dryer and our CD changer. Right here is our AC box, and if you look right here, that is the common motor that brakes on these. It's either the motor or the boss that brakes that holds this little flapper up. If it breaks, it's not always the motor. It could be just a little plastic thing, and Hill Engineering makes a brass version of that. And while we're up here, one more thing is the pop-up headlights. You can see there's actually a gear right here that you can hand crank your headlights up and down. The main mechanism is right down there, and then they are adjustable. All right, so now we've got the hood popped. I'm going to talk about this in two different ways. First, very superficially, and then we're going to go like system by system a little bit more in depth. So what you can see with the hood open easily: oil tank, that's where you fill the oil from, fuel block at the back, power steering reservoir, this is your coolant reservoir with its overflow, oil filter, and then you got your air filters here. On the sides, like we saw up front, there are the shock actuator motors left and right. You can also see fuel filters and a few other things, but you really got to get the camera down in here to see the rest. So now I'm going to talk about the different systems in the car individually. We'll run through them really quick. We'll just start with air. Intake. It actually starts way back over here in the door panel. Right here you'll see the air intake for the radiators, and up above that is where the air for the intake goes. So if we follow the channel up, that comes to the air boxes here. From the air box, it goes through just a standard filter. You can buy these from Ferrari, or K&N makes them. It comes through a Bosch mass airflow sensor. This is actually from a BMW, so replacements are not that expensive if you ever need one. There is an idle air control valve here to let in the for idle settings, I guess. From there it goes into the manifolds, or the intake plenums. Underneath these there are actually velocity stacks, and from those velocity stacks it goes into 8 individual throttle bodies. We dip the camera down here, turn on the flash, you can actually see some of those throttle bodies there, and then the throttle linkage right there. And while we're still up on top, I'll kind of go over some sensors. You got your throttle position sensor. Here is your camshaft position or phase sensor. There is a third wire there that goes to the knock sensor mounted on the block. This is your vacuum pump. Now we'll move on to fuel. We start over here. You can see a lot of your fuel related systems. This is how you open up the fuel door from the inside. Fuel filter, you got some valves and stuff there. The main black hose there is the fuel filler. There is a fuel block on the back of the motor that lets the fuel go to the fuel rails. We dip the camera down here. You can see that main silver part is the fuel rail as it goes to the injectors, and you can also see some throttle bodies there. From the bottom you can see the fuel tank. This large silver is the 20-something gallon tank. On this side you have the fuel pump and the fuel lines. On the other side you actually have the fuel sender unit. On top of the manifolds is part of the emission systems. There are secondary air injection pipes on either side, and they start from the air pump here. So if you just see those tubes, that's what they're related to. And before we go underneath, let's just talk about oil, air, and spark. Here's your oil tank for the dry sump. There are large lines that go to the sump and to the oil cooler. The smaller lines up here up top are just a return to go back to the valve covers on either side. While we're here, we got the oil filter, obviously, and below the oil filter you can see it kind of down there. That is your oil pressure unit. Mine is aftermarket, and the clamp is on there just as a ground. I was trying to get the most accurate reading, and I found this was the way I got it. And then moving over to the ignition system, either side of the motor you have the coils. There's one on either side. The coils run to wires that run to the top of the valve covers for your spark plugs. The spark plugs are located beneath the single valve covers. And then as we go to the last thing, what you can see on top exhaust wise, the bypass valve is back here. And then when we go underneath, I'll show you the thermo probes. There are 3 ECUs for it. 2 are by the emissions related stuff. The third one is up here. It's that green thing. And I honestly don't remember which one's which. I'd have to double check. I think this one is for the driver's side cat. And then over here you have the bypass and the passenger side cat. And then the last thing I'll talk about before I go underneath is just the coolant system. We'll show you the radiators here in a moment. These pipes at the back are the coolant crossover pipes. They also in the middle connect to the water pump. Your thermostat is right underneath this cover, and you can access it underneath the panel. And then as we come back over here, where we kind of showed you earlier, down below the throttle linkage is the water oil heat exchanger. It actually provides coolant and I guess heat to the transaxle to warm it up and then keep it at a constant temperature. And that's also part of the coolant system. All right, so now let's get this thing up on a lift and we'll show you the rest of the components from the bottom. Okay guys, now we got the car up on the lift. You'll notice that the entire car, with the exception of this area right here, is covered with fiberglass panels just for the aerodynamics or whatever. So we need to take them all off. And they are all 8mm or just Phillips head. So now let's go ahead and start to take them off, and that'll give us access to everything else that is there. All right, so now we're up in the air. So let's go ahead and take a look. Starting at the front, the battery location. Yes, you do have to remove the wheel to access the battery location. It's right behind this panel, just a couple Phillips and you're there. There's a horn on the other side, not much else up front here. As you can see, we can take a look at kind of our suspension components. 355s have 4 coilover shocks. Brakes are here, sway bar links, and they have ducting for the cooling of the brakes. As we work our way further back, I didn't take off this panel, but under here is just where the shifter is located, and not a whole lot else. We have jacking points, 1, 2, and one's on the opposite side. As you can see, I'm not using them because they are simply placed too close together when you're on the lift. There's just way too much car hanging off the back. So what the common thing is right here, as you can see, this is actually part of the frame. This right here is just a cheesy sheet metal. So you need to put a wood block there and you can jack it up on the frame. It's a lot safer back just because it's further back. Okay, and from there we can look up at the radiators. On this side you have a radiator that I'm touching here, and just in front of this is your AC condenser. And there's a fan. The other side, the radiator is actually in the front. The rearmost one is your oil cooler. These are the coolant lines back to the top of the sump and to the motor. They attach here to the sump and then also up there as well. The bottom of the oil tank has a drain plug here. I currently am using the drain plug also for my oil temperature switch. And if we come over here and look at the motor, you'll see that this is our main sump. This is not your drain plug. A lot of people mistakenly try to pull these off. Underneath here is, I guess, the spring for your oil pressure pump, and just never really undo that. Your drain is actually right here, and so when you want to do an oil change, you drain it from here and the oil tank and the filter, and that's pretty much the 10-second version of that. So from the front of the motor, what can you see? There are 3 accessory belts. First one goes to the air conditioning compressor. The second one you see over here goes to a tensioner and over to the alternator. Here's the back of the alternator. From above the alternator, it gets really hard to see, especially with the camera. It goes up to the water pump. And up there, the aluminum looking thing is the water pump, and that belt goes to there. You'll see there's a second belt on the water pump that then goes to the power steering pump. So that's the 3rd accessory belt. I believe the power steering pump is accessible with the motor in, but the water pump you can only do during the engine out. Now, timing belts. Obviously you have to remove the engine to do the timing belts. You can do some limited inspections with them in place. You can see there's the bottom of one there, so you can kind of check on the condition of them. There's the bottom of the other side. You really won't be able to see it, but up there is part of the tensioner and the hydraulic tensioner as well. The other good place to kind of view it from, you stick your phone up here, you actually can see the entire back of the tensioner, the cam gears, the cam belt, and my Hill Engineering tensioner pulley. Now on the other side, there really is not a whole lot to see. If you get a mirror, you can kind of see it above the alternator, but there's no way I can get a camera up in there. It's very limited. As we work our way back, transmission or transaxle, I suppose. Here's the drain for it. The fill plug is just up here. You can access it from the top. fill plug. It is located right there on the side of the transmission next to the clutch. These are the lines that run to that water oil separator that's in the engine valley. And as we get further back, we have the clutch bleed valve. And that's pretty much it for the drive line. Up on this side of the motor, you can see our starter. It's actually fairly accessible. All right, from there, we'll go to the exhaust system. Manifold here. They have an interesting exhaust system on these. They Y off right here above the axle shaft. The lower portion, as you can see, there's an oxygen sensor. It goes through the catalytic converters. From there, it goes to a thermal probe and then into the muffler. The upper section right here is the secondary catalytic converter that goes to the bypass system, which is simply just the sound, the valve right up there at the top. You'll see it opens up just to allow additional sound above certain RPM levels. As you can see on the other side, you got the other thermal probe. Two of your thermal probe ECUs are in this little station right here, along with all the air pump and air tank. The third ECU is actually up top on the frame over there. You can see it from the top of the motor. While we have the car up on the lift, I'll give you the 10-second version of how to do the engine out. Evacuate the AC, remove the bumper, remove the muffler. From there are bolts, 2 bolts here and here, 2 bolts way up top on either side, 12 bolts here. Those are the main things that hold everything else in. Undo the coolant lines and AC lines that go to the firewall. After that, the assembly sets on a cradle and you lift the car away. It's actually made to come out. So the tires, everything comes all out in one piece, and that lets you work on it. And then you just lower the car back down, tighten these bolts back up. That's the oversimplified version, but they're made to do. There you have it. There is the underside and under hood overview of a Ferrari 355. I'm hoping that you found this a little bit interesting, and maybe that it's not so intimidating. Because yes, when you look at this, I can understand how a lot of people would be intimidated by it. There's just a lot going on here. But when you start looking at the systems individually, just the exhaust or just the accessories, just the oiling system, you'll really understand that these are very basic cars. Everything is just bolts, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey to replace. And everything is DIY. There are vast resources on these cars, like Ferrari Chat. It's a group of people that have done everything to these cars, and it's a very good resource to find out anything if you ever have an issue with them. The engine out, everybody talks about that, and they wonder why it's so expensive. It really is only about $150 worth of parts, but it's the time to do everything. So you'll do the $500 water pump. You'll do all the motor mounts. That's what I did on mine. All that stuff that you can't do, because if you do the belts and then a month later the water pump goes, you got to take it all back out again. There's a bunch of rubber hoses in there as well that they're 20 years old now. They could go at any time, so just replace them. And it's really not that bad. It sounds like it is because you've never done it. Once you've done it, you kind of have a better understanding of it. So this video is just to show you the 355, and I'm hoping that you're more encouraged maybe to get a car like this or 360 or any other car, because you can actually work on it yourself. These are fun cars. They're a joy to own, and